it helps to, um, yeah, it helps to be on top of that stuff because
Sure.
otherwise you can run into some interesting things.
Yeah,
Um,
sounds good. And then also there could be some really good questions coming out of it as well.
yes, there have been a
Okay,
few,
excellent.
and I do that on my phone so I don't mess up. And it looks like we're live. So hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Let me hit the intro thing and let's go. And hey everyone, today I have the absolutely fantastic pleasure of speaking with the one, the only, Glenn Austin, the CFO of DCG or Dash Core Group. How's it going, Glenn?
Excellent. How are you doing, Joel?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
Great, thanks.
Let's just keep on saying how are you doing, how are you doing until it's just an infinite loop. Um, but you're out in Phoenix right now, correct?
That's right. 110 degrees out right now, so not enjoying the weather at all.
Yeah.
But I hear next week it'll be nice and cool in the high 90s.
Yes, it was in the high 90s with a lot of humidity here in New Hampshire for a while, and
Got
then
it.
which is bad. But then this week it's been like high of like 68, 69 or so, and then low in like 50. It's been, which is what I like a lot. So you can
Perfect
suffer as
weather.
much as you want out there. I think, I wonder if suffering produces good code or something, if that's the way these things work. Yeah,
Way to make me feel jealous.
it happens. It happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thanks for coming on. There's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. And I think that kind of your segment of the whole operation is one that's, I would say, often overlooked or ignored or something like that. But it's one of the very important bits because if the numbers don't add up, the lights don't stay on, and isn't Dash all about being money? And so you think the finance, honey, yeah, it would work, but everyone just wants to talk about the code and the apps and the stuff. And then
Yeah.
to a lesser extent, now they're about the economics, where people are like, you know, how does this work out? What are the economic incentives and stuff? But then in reality, the better, the financial side is pretty important. So
Yeah.
first, what have you been up to lately? Just in general, like,
So I've been doing, the CFO role. So as you said, kind of dealing with submitting proposals to the network, figuring out our budgets, figuring out, how much we need to request from the network in order to fund our operations. And then aside from that, I've kind of gotten involved in the legal and regulatory side too. So, we were delisted in Japan, as you heard. So I've been fighting that decision. I think we're going to make some progress there in 2021. We're looking at how private send is perceived by various regulators. So, we've been talking to some Korean exchanges, to exchanges in Australia, and just explaining how private send technology works and why we shouldn't be considered a privacy coin from a regulatory standpoint. So that's been pretty exciting as well. And then, I've also been doing some of the less glamorous HR type work, doing some of the redoing contracts on a 6 month or 1 year basis for all the subcontractors and just, tracking hours and all of that as well. So I kind of wear three hats at Dashcorp right now.
plenty of hats.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a few questions that we had but before we jump into those, I think that because it's more topical, the regulatory thing I think is interesting. And
Yeah.
recently, I saw some Australian exchanges delisted a lot of privacy coins. As far as I could see from, I did not go super into all the details of which ones, but most of them seem to be only the encryption focused coins. But there was like one or two that had Dash on that list too. They just did like a blanket thing. And
Right.
so, I'm sure you're more up on the situation than I am. So, what's been going on in Australia as far as that's concerned?
So from what I initially saw was that a number of Australian exchanges delisted Dash. And for me, that was a big warning signal. We wouldn't want to, just be delisted, obviously, from all of Australian exchanges. Similar
Hmm.
to Japan, again, re-entering that market will cost a lot. So it's better to just prevent the delistings in the first place. A day or two after those were announced, we saw that a number of those exchanges that were going to delist us then partnered with Chainalysis. And
Mm,
Chainalysis, began coverage of Dash, I would say, I think in April or May. I think it was May of this year. And they
mhm,
basically said that the term of privacy coin for Dash is a misnomer because
mhm.
private send is essentially coin join, and that exists on any transparent blockchain. So since we don't have hidden addresses or hidden amounts, we shouldn't be considered a privacy coin. Privacy is kind of like a spectrum. Coin join is one technique you can apply on that spectrum, but it's not like we're actually shielding addresses or anything like that. So going back to the Australian exchanges, they partner with Chainalysis. Chainalysis has been great in explaining to exchanges how you can put in the same AML/compliance type techniques that you can for Bitcoin or for Litecoin or for any other transparent blockchain. And basically, they're not going to delist Dash. I think there's still a couple of exchanges in Australia. I think Binance Australia might have not, might still be delisting us as of now, but we've reached out to them as well, and we're trying to engage them in dialogue too.
Yeah, so it seems like from what you're saying there that it's always an education issue. They hear privacy coin and they're like,
Right.
this is it. We can't do this. And that seems to be most of it. And what changes their mind is some kind of authority saying the opposite. Now, it could be a governmental authority, but the government's never going to say, no, 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 you do want to use this coin. Like, they're not going to do that. So
Right.
sometimes when you educate regulators and exchanges enough, it kind of stops the bleeding, maybe. But it's like, it seems like this is the first example of an active relisting kind of
Mhm.
process where they increase their regulatory compliance measures, and then they relist Dash as a result, which is like
Right.
a fantastic thing. And so, chain analysis and what were some of the other compliance kind of companies that Dash is enabled by,
So,
supported by, partnered with, or whatever?
blockchain intel.
Mm-hmm.
So we've partnered with them as well. And then there's CoinFirm. They also cover Dash. So between those three, I think the fourth one there's Elliptic. I'm not sure if they cover us or not, but those are kind of the four big players in the space. We've
Yeah.
also been able to do the same thing in Korea, South Korea, that is, obviously. So, South Korea was kind of the first area where the regulators were cracking down. We proactively engaged the exchanges and the regulators, educated them, and then they were like, okay, great, you're not a privacy coin, so let's keep you listed. And we're taking that approach in Australia as well. In the US, we've proactively also actually approached regulators to say, hey, there have been concerns about us being a privacy coin. And I think that really stems from just not understanding how the technology works. It's literally someone sitting down and Googling, what are the privacy coins out there? And Dash, from its beginnings from 2015, 2016, was labeled as a privacy coin, and that reputation just carries on. Um, I like to think of it as, you can enable or disable privacy features on your blockchain, right? So you can easily move down the spectrum of becoming more private or less private, depending on what you have enabled on your specific platform. So it's not like one coin is a privacy coin and then it's set in stone. What you want to do is I would periodically revisit that assumption every year or every 2 years and say, hey, does it still have the characteristics of being more private than some benchmark or less private, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. And so these 3 to 4 major compliance firms for cryptocurrency, how wide is their reach? I would assume that everywhere in the US, any major exchange is probably affected by those. But what about Western Europe? What about Australia? What about Asia? And then what about just outside of there? Like how common, like it would be great to be, oh, coin firm is great, but then no one in Australia uses or cares, and therefore now you have to just kind of fight from zero.
I think most exchanges at this point have partnered with one of these. And, yeah, they collaborate and work together. And it really does help them address any type of concerns, any type of regulators or governmental bodies might have.
Yeah, so what's the outlook for Australia then? It seems like, again, Dash was not one of the more targeted ones, but did get targeted by a couple. Do you
Mhm.
think that there's a good chance that Dash stays enabled in all those?
I think there's a good chance. I think it's a matter of us continuing to reach out to both the exchanges and the regulators and engaging them in dialogue. Once um, Dash Core Group a year ago actually was able to do private send transactions on the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, I remember
So I
that.
can show you a Bitcoin block and I can show you a Dash block where private send is done. And you literally couldn't tell the difference between the two of them, except one would say BTC and the other one would say Dash. You had
And,
10,
and the
20
BTC one would
inputs.
cost five
Yeah,
times as much, but hey, that's
right,
something
exactly.
else.
Right. But yeah, you literally have 20 inputs, 20 outputs, and you can't match one address to the other directly within that block right there, right? So it's literally the same thing. Now, we happen to make it with Dash, it's easier, it's faster, but from a regulatory standpoint, that shouldn't change the fact that, it's an implementation of CoinJoin.
Yeah, so has there been an issue with regulators as far as the fact that the masternodes are implementing CoinJoin rather than just some other third party? They don't really
I,
care.
I think what they cared about was they really wanted to know, do masternodes ever take custody of the funds? And they don't, right? It always stays with the user. You send the funds from one address in your wallet to another address within your same wallet. So as long as the masternodes never um, take custody of the funds, that's what they really cared about. A lot of these third-party mixing services will take custody, and there you can run into a number of issues.
Yeah, for sure.
So once we sit down with the regulators and kind of explain how it works, they're like, "Oh, wow, we had no." Sometimes they'll say, "We obviously knew," or sometimes they'll say, "Hey, we had no idea. This is great. This definitely lowers what we perceived your risk profile to be."
Yeah, so is it then just a game of hitting up every regulator on the planet and hitting every main compliance company on the planet? So was it Elliptic or whatever the name of the other one was? It would be about making sure that they support Dash, and then just every major regulator, whenever they start trying to delist stuff, you beat down their door and get a meeting with them, and that kind of solves the problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been doing. Unfortunately, we've been more reactive than proactive in this area. Again, we have been proactive in terms of going after the markets we really are in, like in the US and South Korea. But, our business development team is a team of two. They have a lot of things on their plate already. I obviously have to handle the finances and all that. So we can't, approach, let's say, Singapore and say, "Hey guys, let's educate you on this," until we kind of hear that there might be some type of issue coming up. And at that point, we deploy, right? So it has been reactive, but that's been mostly because of just resources. If I could just reach out proactively to every single regulator out there, I would love to do that, right?
Yeah. Now, how did Korea end up shaking out? Because I remember there was a wave of delistings for all kinds of coins in Korea. There was a few that I remember covering that that relisted Dash or pause thingies or whatever, and that's kind of the last I sort of heard because headlines, you know, and you have to follow up these stories, otherwise, the headlines just go away when it's like, oh, minor crisis in China, could
Right.
DeFi be the next big thing, and then it
Yeah.
just moves on. So, what
Right.
is the status of Dash in Korea and Korean exchanges now?
So most of those exchanges ended up not delisting Dash. So we were able to reverse it. I think one of them might have. We had pretty low liquidity on it anyway, and I think they did it for less regulatory reasons and maybe more, business reasons, so to speak. But we're always happy to re-engage them and explain to them, "Hey, this is why you shouldn't have delisted us, or this is why you should relist us at this point."
Yeah, what meaningful progress has been made with Japan?
Japan. So there was a separate proposal put forth
Yeah, I
by
remember.
Yosuke, which is Dash Japan, and he's been working with us. So, he's been contacting regulators. He finally was able to engage a law firm
Mm-hmm.
to actually write a opinion on private send and on Dash in general. And he's also now engaging an accounting firm. When I was in Japan this time last year, we sat down with the JVCEA, which is the Japan Virtual Currency Association, and they basically said we need a statement from a big four or an accounting firm stating that your blockchain is auditable. So our blockchain is no different from Bitcoin's from a
Yeah.
technology perspective. So that should be pretty simple. But they really want that statement by a um, accounting firm for
Mm-hmm.
reputational issues or whatever. So kind of he's pursuing those two memos. Once he does that, we need to partner with a reputable Japanese exchange and then talk with them about a relisting basically on that exchange.
Yeah. I mean, that seems very achievable. And I remember
Yeah.
Japan is the toughest nut to crack. And it
Hmm.
just seems to be whenever you talk about delist privacy coin, Japan's like number one on the list.
Yeah.
And so it seems like, do you have any hope that if Japan opens its doors to Dash, that that's going to have a domino effect in other areas where like Australia is like, we're not nowhere near as tough as those guys, and then they, or is it still going to have to be like a per country kind of a basis?
I think we're listed in most countries, so
Mm-hmm.
Japan is just going to take a while, but I think we will get there. It's just it's about education, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
about making sure you sit down with the right regulators and the right exchanges, and they understand your story, and then they actually also want to list your coin for business reasons as
Yeah,
well, right? So that
that's the big one.
that's the big one, right? So I'm optimistic about it. I just think it won't be within the next 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
The time horizon there is a bit longer. I think it'll take place in 2021.
All right. Well, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Now, the last kind of thing I had on the privacy issue. So when we're talking about privacy, obviously one of the hallmarks of crypto is pseudonymity, which offers
Correct.
a level of privacy.
Hmm.
And of course, that's trying to be digital cash. Was trying for a little bit more of that angle. But there's a lot of different coins out there, from the Zcashes and Zcoins of the world to the Moneros of the world that have advanced kind of things. And across the board, is there just is privacy just seen as like a non-starter, like this should never be fully private, or is there some sort of nuance? Like I remember you said about the Japanese authorities looking for auditability, a statement of auditability. It's not necessarily can you deduce a transaction, can you find out who sent what, but it's more can you audit the chain to detect criminal activity kind of
Hmm.
thing. So is that just kind of the nuance, or is it that a lot of exchanges just don't want to, a lot of regulators just don't believe that privacy is a fundamental right?
I personally believe privacy is a fundamental right, right? I
Yeah.
was born in the former Soviet Union,
Yeah.
and there was no privacy there. A lot of issues stem from that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
freedom is a fundamental right. So I'm a strong proponent of privacy. Be it from your, let's say you send a transaction to your neighbor. You wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
want your neighbor to know how much crypto you have. Let's say you wouldn't want your boss to know if you donated funds to a political party, right? A particular one. Let's say you want to make an anonymous contribution. Like um, you know, there's a reason bank account statements aren't widely circulated, right? That's also a privacy issue. So for me, it's a fundamental right. I think in our society, like in the US,
Mm-hmm.
regulators recognize that. For them, the tension lies in, do I still have the tools to capture the bad actors, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people who are doing the wrong thing. Do I have the tools in order to combat that? Or is it, or can I do nothing about that? And that's that tension between people's personal freedoms and figuring out how to catch the bad guys is what's going to be the theme, I think, going forward.
Yeah,
And it'll always be kind of like a cat and mouse game, right?
of
When there are
course.
more advanced techniques, then regulations try to catch up, and just I think it'll just continue to evolve. Um, that's a space that'll be really interesting to see how it evolves and what it looks like in 10, 15 years, because it could, become quite dystopian
Yeah.
to a certain degree as well. So yeah, I'm fascinated by this topic in general, and yeah, would love to see how it evolves.
Well, let me just give a real world example from my own life.
Okay.
I had a friend who, when I was living in Phoenix, was my roommate for a while, best friend, and he moved back to Mexico, and he got basically, very long story, but he got basically framed for something he didn't do in the eyes of the cartels, and they were chasing after him, trying to kill him, and he was moving from state to state in Mexico trying to escape, and then basically when he's ready to just give up and stop running, I managed to get him to escape to Canada, and I paid for his plane ticket with crypto. And I'm sure you've seen enough things in the news with credit card hacks and data leaks and stuff that you could just like buy credit card things, and it's like you could probably find data or hack and just say, well, who paid for this guy's plane ticket? Let's go after him. But because it wasn't, then my safety's secure for now. This guy
Right.
managed to escape, and he's still alive to this day. So
Hmm.
privacy to a certain extent, and crypto saved his life. And this is in the,
Yeah.
the very pre mainstream crypto days. So
Hmm.
that's one reason I really think it's like, a fundamental right to have some sort of privacy,
Yeah.
especially when you start seeing the kinds of things that people do with when they find out your data.
Yeah. Absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah. So it's kind of how much of a regulatory problem is regular or pain in the butt, let's just say, that you know of is regular daily like private send use. So say I just get the brand spanking new Dash Electrum wallet, which lets you mix on mobile, and I'm just
Hmm.
mixing all the time because I just love the tech and I just love the idea of like financial privacy, even though I have nothing to hide. I have a very normal thing, and I'm going out there to my little coffee shop buying coffee. I'm buying this, I'm buying that. Is that going to be a pain in the butt for like if some restaurants like, hey, like every third like every third time this guy buys beer, for you get like a beer sale in Dash, it's like they can't tell where it's from. And like is that kind of because I use private send to like buy it there, or like this coffee, like like a whole tenth of a percent of your coffee sales come from this, like can't find out where the money comes from. Like, is that going to be an accounting nightmare or problem for people for small purchases? And if not, what's kind of the area at which it starts to become more of a pain in the butt, where then when they try to cash out to the exchange is like, whoa, wait, we don't know where this comes from. We need to know more.
Yeah. I honestly don't know the answer to that question, right? So
Hmm.
how the exchanges work, um, and what it would mean if you sent funds to directly to an exchange, at what point that would trigger a question or an inquiry or something like that. I actually have no transparency to that, so I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an
But
interesting.
that's an interesting question though.
Yeah. Now, the last thing on the privacy thing, because of course this is just like a snowball of questions when you come to this, but I'm pretty sure this is
Hmm.
the last one, is when you talk about the encrypted privacy coins, whether it's, Zcash with the ZK snarks or Zcoin with their Lelantus upgrade, which has some very interesting stuff about burning coins and freshly minting them at the destination and having like a no traceable, no correlation between the amount that you put in the burn state and that you get out. Like some very interesting kind of ideas. And then of course Monero, where everything is, protected by bulletproofs, everything bulletproof, so to speak. And you need like special view keys and stuff to be able to see where a transaction came from. Are they just like dead in the water as far as regulation? Because like I know Zcash is is supported by Gemini, which is one of the more bit licensed exchanges out there, and that because it's most of Zcash is transparent, that
Right.
might be kind of why they feel comfortable with that. They might not buy shielded transactions. That's kind of like my question is, what are the regulatory prospects for, pretty much universal inclusion for some of these encrypted coins? Is it just like not going to happen because you can't audit the whole blockchain? Is it only going to happen under certain circumstances for very specific to the transaction? Like what do you think?
So it's interesting when Chainalysis, for example, covered Dash, they also covered Zcash. So they covered, Dash and Zcash, at the same time they announced coverage of the two coins. With Dash, they actually went out and stated that it's a misnomer to call Dash a privacy coin. So we've been using that as ammunition in our discussions with the regulators. With Zcash, they're specifically covering the transparent portion of the blockchain. I think Zcash right now, most of the transactions, or 90 or 99%, I don't remember the exact number, are on kind of the transparent chain. So I think that's how they've been pivoting and explaining it to regulators. It'll be interesting to see if people start using more of the privacy features going forward and what that will mean. We've probably heard this a ton of times. People say that they really care about privacy, but when it comes down to it, they typically don't act like it. You are obviously a shining counterexample of that, right?
Of course.
But a lot of people generally state that they care about privacy much more than they actually do. So that's also kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a fashionable belief.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and so with something like Monero, for example, which I guess I did what I would consider one of the right things. The right thing isn't just one right thing, but one of the right things by just leaning all the way into the privacy thing, because if you don't ever really know what the implications are. You don't really know how far it works if you don't just like live it. It's not like the Zcash thing. It's easy to talk about how good it works, but if you don't actually use it, you don't actually know the problems with it. So something like Monero, would they ever be able to be listed on Coinbase? And I mean, obviously, that's a very specific question. Let me just rephrase that in a way that you won't get busted for trying to answer. But something like Monero, would they ever be listed are they likely to be listed on a large regulated exchange? And if not, is that just because of the fundamental way that you just cannot look at the blockchain and all the transactions are invisible unless there's special circumstances that they don't want to do? Is that kind of
I
where
would
you're at?
really defer that to the exchanges, right?
Yeah.
Each exchange has their own policy for, they have a checklist a lot of times as to what criteria and what requirements and what circumstances are around the coin, around its launch, around its price. So privacy is just one of many factors they'll look at. I don't know which exchanges will specifically exclude Monero because of its privacy features, or some other feature that we may not know about, right? So I'm going to evade and avoid answering that question in that manner.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, so we had a bunch of questions regarding more specific to your very specific role, which of course this is more generally around your role, but about basically dealing with the purse strings of Dash Core Group and all that has to offer. Now, of course, dealing in crypto at all, as I have for many years, and as some businesses unfortunately have to do, it can be a little bit of a nightmare with the ups and downs of the prices and stuff. But it's even worse with it's even more extreme with the Dash Treasury, because not only do you have to like win an election every month in order to get paid, or like considering all the nonsense with the political elections in the U.S. Can you imagine now just like election every month? Otherwise you don't eat. It's like,
Right.
It's pretty terrible. But also, like when the price goes down, it's not just you got paid, and if you hold any, you have risk of that going down. It's your ability to get paid goes down as well. So there's like the double risk and stuff. So this has been something that I'm sure has been answered before, but it helps to kind of have it out for all the new viewers and stuff. Is what is Dash Core Group's break-even Dash price point to maintain present operations? So what price can Dash Core Group keep? At what price of Dash can Dash Core Group keep the lights on as the lights on that are on right now?
Right. And yes, that, I have answered that question, but that is a moving target, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you were to ask me that when I first started here at Dashcore Group, what, 2.5 years ago, that number would have been around 200, right? As of 4 months ago, it was probably closer to $65 per dash. So
Mm-hmm.
as of today, our break-even price, assuming we continue requesting 60% of the network funds, which is what
Mm-hmm.
we've been doing for the last year and a half, is roughly $77, right? So what does this pay for? It kind of pays for Dashcore Group salary. You do have to note that, we still have 6 volunteers that are contributing for free or at reduced rate, and they are planning to continue to volunteer, but at any moment they can unvolunteer, right? It also pays for kind of our translation efforts, our infrastructure costs, some business development activity. Also covers kind of the day-to-day legal expenses, and then covers this office that I'm sitting in right now, which is at Skysong in
Yeah.
Scottsdale.
Which is a
Um,
fun office. I've been a few
yeah,
times. It's
yeah, you have, yeah. I
it's a
saw
nice
you
little
here. What?
place.
Yeah, earlier. What, in
Yeah.
December? I think we met here. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, what it doesn't fund are, we're like at baseline levels in terms of marketing activity right now.
Mm-hmm.
And for business development, it assumes a pretty low monthly spend of around $10,000 to $15,000 a month,
Mm-hmm.
which, it's sufficient to get things done. Um, we of course wish it was more than 10,000 a month, right? So, you always hope for more. Now, if we really had to slash our expenses and keep the lights on and not really significantly impact our operations, I think we can go down from that break-even price of $77 all the way down to $67,
Mm.
by asking volunteers to step up and tightening our belt, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't ideal, and it's definitely not a long-term solution, right? And then if you're looking at anything below $50 for a dash, and for a prolonged time period, at that point we're really, draining our reserves. And
Mm.
if the price remained that low at that point, after several months, we would have to start making changes to the organization.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's kind of where we are. Thankfully, I would say, we have been above that $77 threshold for the last few months. So we have been able to increase our reserves. And, we're really close to getting to that 3-month minimum
Mm-hmm.
compensation expense reserve that I keep talking about in our quarterly calls.
Yeah.
Um, we're it's probably, I'm repeating that as often as I was repeating opening a bank account when I first joined Dashcore Group, which was also a major challenge, but that got done. But
Yeah, for
right now
sure.
we are sitting at 2.8 months of compensation expense reserve, and that's really the highest it's been since I joined Dashcore Group. Um, you know, so
That is
huge achievement in my mind. Yeah.
yes, and of course, for many years I worked for the Dow itself for the Dash Force group, and I remember like we did not have reserve plans out of a fundamental kind of a philosophical reason. It's not that like didn't plan for a rainy day. We're just like we know that people are going to be attacking us, and so we want to make sure we're super like just like only getting paid. That's it. And then
Yeah.
if there happens to be extra money, then we just like don't ask for money until we're back at we have no money kind of thing.
Right.
And of course, there was quite a few months towards before we ended up dissolving the organization, and Mark took part of it to a different spot, and I went independent with my spot. Is
Right.
there's a few months of little or no pay for like the three partners while trying to keep the
Yeah.
employees paid. And so like yeah,
Right.
no, I know how that kind of thing can work. But like on that subject, you mentioned the volunteers, and this was not something I specifically asked. So if you don't have the math in front of you, I completely understand. But what would the current operations break even point be? You said 77, but what would it be if the volunteers were compensated at regular rates? Do you kind of know what that would have been?
Yeah. Let me just do a quick calculation.
Yeah, I'll check some of the comments here in the meantime.
Sure. It would be around 85 or $86 for the
So
year.
very close to where we're at now. Like,
Very close to where we're sitting right now. Yeah. And to be fair, out of those 6 volunteers, I know there's one volunteer who's basically going to be a volunteer indefinitely. So that person never wants to get paid, right?
yeah.
Um, And then there are others who, are fine where they are right now and don't want to do it, don't want to get reinstated, I know at least this year and maybe going into next year. And then there might be one or two that would be looking to, get reinstated once we kind of met that 3-month compensation minimum. So, people's circumstances vary tremendously, right?
Yeah. And now, of course, we were talking about prices and like what can you afford. A lot of that, no one really cares on a surface level what DCG, like how much Dashboard Group spends or the budget. Like no outside observer just cares on its own about that metric. They care about what it means. And the thing that's been great about the very bottom of the bear market and up has been the development lights have kept on. The core protocol has kept on being developed and maintained, and Dash platform has been surging ahead, and is almost out on full test net, and yay, that will be awesome. But so that's like the number one, like I'm not like where most investors are like, I'm not going to sell all my coins right now. Like, yes, this is good. This is great. It's moving on. Now, at the same time, I've spoken to quite a few different developers and stuff, and there's a lot of, yeah, that's a great idea, but we don't have enough people for that right now. Like, we're focusing on just like what matters. And like, for example, overhauling the private send experience was one of those things that I've heard kind of mentioned. It's like, yeah, I'd love to do it, but it's up to me and I'm busy and we don't have other people. So basically, and of course, huge shout out to Andy Freer and his app program, his DApp development program, which I believe is, I don't know if it's the first in history, but it's one of the very few proposals that has passed with 0 no votes.
Which is just incredible.
Yeah, he's doing a great job, and I'm helping out a couple of those devs there with like brainstorming because I can't code for anything. But I'm helping trying to figure out economics and incentives and UX because it's just so much cool stuff going on there. So it doesn't mean there's not a lot of development and development money even. But as far as like core development things and, all that. So basically, what would be the price point at which that core group would feel comfortable in starting to hire extra developers for other things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what's important in kind of mentioning price levels is that it's not the price itself that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that matters, but it's also kind of the duration at which it stays at that level, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if Dash were to skyrocket right now to 300 and then stay there for 3 days and come back to 86, well, guess what? We didn't really get to capture the benefit of that price, right? We want to slowly sell the Dash we get from the
I would have bought a new
rewards.
couch if it did that really quick. Just like right now, the other one's fading. Just get in there real quick while I can.
There you go. So kind of when you mention a price point to me, I'm going to rephrase it as saying, what sustained price level would you need above a certain level in order to attract more
Yeah, and by
developers, right?
sustained, how many
Yeah.
months would you consider to be sustained?
And I would say 2 to 3 months in my mind right now is pretty much sustained. Where if the price didn't dip below 100 too many times over the next 2 3 months, I think at that point we would consider hiring extra developers. There are some other needs
Mm-hmm.
that Dash Core Group has prior to that. I think it's important to kind of take care of the people we have here
Mm-hmm.
and improve conditions and maybe do some type of cost of living adjustment as well, which hasn't happened.
Yeah, buy an
Um,
air conditioning unit,
right,
upgrade
buy the
from
new couch.
upgrade from bread and water.
Yeah. So there are some
Install a
ideas we
couple
want
windows.
to.
And just get rid of get new prison pajamas. I don't know.
Right, get
Yeah,
rid of the fax machine, right?
yeah.
So get rid of kind of, so just use the additional funds internally first. But I do think it's really important to hire extra developers. The other thing I think that would be incredible to see is that to see an expansion in the ecosystem as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those extra developers, I wouldn't even necessarily say they need to sit under the Dash Core Group umbrella. What I like about Dash in general is that there are so many other teams that can work independently and ask for funding. And when I look at the budget, there's been a significant amount of Dash that has gone unallocated in the last few months, right? So I think
Yeah.
this most recent super block, there was roughly 400 to 500 Dash that didn't get allocated. That could have gone to, support a team of developers. So, when we talk about attracting extra developers, doesn't necessarily have to be under the Dash Core Group umbrella.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's been an it could be a huge side tangent, so I'm not just going to say it really quick. That is, it's one of those awesome and challenging bits about Dash is that there's no DCG is the only real main team to join. Everything else is like entrepreneurship. It's like, what do you want to do? It's like, all right, I want to be an entrepreneur. Make it happen. And you're just looking around at nothing. There's nothing around. You have to like come up with an idea, market test the idea. You have to like do just chisel your livelihood out of the rock. It doesn't exist. You got to create it, and that's why it's so fulfilling for a lot of people. And so that's the thing with like developers. Like, there's a lot of volunteer developers in the crypto world because it's an open source passion project for a lot of people. And then there's some bounty programs, and then but then people think that they can work for Dash, and they just say who's hiring, and it's like, well, maybe DCG, maybe not. Other than that, there's Andy's program. If you're not a platform developer, like, what do you do? It's like, well, then you kind of have to build something from scratch. So it can get a little challenging to get with that. I do know that there's a few developers who have been chatting about improving, basically polishing Dash's privacy functions. And,
Right.
not, of course, and before anyone gets freaking out about, no, we're about to get delisted everywhere now after all this work. No, just streamlining the things that are already there, that are already kind of available in other implementations, including like working on some Dash improvement proposals or DIPs that would make certain things possible. But it's hard to kind of get motion on that without like a leader, like an entrepreneur who just says,
Yeah.
I think we should start working on this. Here, let's put in some like stuff. I'm going to go do a bounty program, or I'm going to hire 2-3 devs, just like the Dash Electrum team has been another independent of Dash Core Group development team that has
That's
been
right.
working, has been funded. And so there needs to be more of that, but you need to like start from somewhere, have an idea, start building it,
Yeah.
and then it's going to be awesome.
Right. And I think that'll be important once platform rolls out, right? We'll want to attract developers to work on apps or to build on top of platform as well. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And if anyone's listening and wants to do stuff like that, I'm not a developer. I'm not going to develop. Sorry, but and I can't manage developers either because again I don't know what I'm looking for and stuff. But if someone wants some great ideas on things that need to be done as far as product, because I'm sort of the consummate crypto user that's been using crypto and blockchain every day for the last 7 years, I'd love to find a way. Doesn't need to be even paid, but just like someone who will say, like, for example, Bitcoin Cash's Flip Starter that they have, which is kind of a crowdfund system that if the goal isn't reached within a certain amount, it automatically refunds all the donations. So it's kind of like a treasury-ish donation system. That would be fantastic to port to Dash. That's just like one example. And that alongside the treasury would be fantastic because the treasury is what everyone can agree on. But there's some stuff that, like, say you have that misses by a narrow vote, and it's like, oh man, but those people who voted believe strongly enough, they can then donate to that and make it get done another thing. So to develop all those things, that would be great. I'm full of ideas, and that's kind of about it. I'm an opinionated jackass, whatever it is. But the next one, of course, is at what price point, again, sustained 3 months price point, which results in more money being available. At what sustained price point would DCG feel comfortable in starting to like engage in some marketing campaigns? So not just okay, keep the lights on, make a video or two, but like now we're starting to commission like a series of videos and start to do paid advertisement and paid sponsorships on podcasts and stuff, which by the way, if you want to and advertise on this one, I don't know if it's a good ROI since I'm already talking about this stuff, but hey, you can do that. But at what price point would that be? Would that be a thing?
That's a tough question because as you know, marketing campaigns can literally cost anywhere between, 10,000 or millions of dollars, right? So depending on what you're trying to do. Um, there is a clear need to market Dash. And I think with the release of Dash platform, we really need to market the features of platform and all of its benefits and get that across. In my mind, what's going to happen is we're going to request Dash for this regardless of price,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're going to put forth a marketing proposal for a set amount of Dash and where the price is. Once the funds come in, that's what we'll be able to do depending on, the budget available to us. Um, I hope it translates into a higher amount of US dollars than a lower amount, right? And if the price is in triple digits, I think we would be able to do something more than just keeping the lights on, obviously, right? To actually do a proper marketing campaign
Mm.
with that leads to something that's impactful. I know right now Fernando, the chief marketing officer, is literally kind of in the last stages of putting together a specific plan around all this. And I know the plan itself is most likely based on scenario planning, meaning, if the price is 200, this is what we recommend. If it's 150, this is what we recommend. If it's 100, this is what we can afford. So, kind of putting in price triggers around what it is that we're going to end up rolling out. But there's a clear need that we'll need to roll something out concurrent with the release of Dash Platform.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what was the last time we saw each other in person, of course, was during the whole the second open house. Of course, the first Dash Core Group open house was in early 2017. I was
Yeah,
there as well, but then this one is late 2019 to
right.
announce that Dash platform was done and in on EvoNet. There's
Yeah,
something that was out, something existed, something you could play around with.
yeah,
And oddly, it was a very weird time because it was the bottom of the crypto market, so people were all grumpy for whatever, for all associated reasons.
yes,
People were kind of like feeling it was like the second to last day of the year when this was released, and the whole thing was if evolution or whatever's considered some kind of evolution thing is not out at the end of the year, a lot of people were like, I'm dumping all my Dash. This is crazy. It was definitely a high pressure time. And also, Ryan picked this time to what a lot of people felt was overshadow the momentous announcement by talking about tokenomics. And I don't know how I feel about that in retrospect as far as the timing of it. When you have something you have to address, you address it when you have an audience, right? Sometimes that
yeah,
can't be, and maybe it's better to overshadow that it's not a full mainnet release or the full testnet release we're expecting next quarter. Maybe, who knows? But that's neither here nor there. The point is, he brought up this whole tokenomics thing where he noted that the circulating supply of Dash, the change to the rate of circulating supply of Dash caused some weird unintentional price problems. And of
yeah,
course, that Dash's mining and masternode combo, just the way it shakes out, the incentives cause a giant spike in the price, where Dash was ranked number 3 for a little while and then got up to about $1,600 per coin in late 2017, and then just took a monumental crash. And that it would be better if that would be tighter in the range. And anyway, there's a lot of stuff on that. I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but in proposing a change, which was instead of the 50-50 miner masternode split, it would turn to a 60-40 over a long period of time to sort of even out the changes in circulating supply. But as part of that, it's like, hey, now that we're talking about that, what if we had a treasury that was more flexible? And this is there's a lot of, before people start freaking out in the comments and stuff, because there's some people who are very passionate about this issue and are involved in their own kind of initiatives and stuff.
hmm
Basically, the idea was basically here's how things work, right? Scarcity applies, and the more scarce an asset is, the better. And so,
right,
say you have a 10% treasury, 10% of the coin supply, and if you don't spend it, which is right now the way it is, if you don't spend any portion of that, that doesn't get created, which means your Dash is more scarce if you don't spend it, if you don't create it for the treasury, and therefore more valuable. And of course, you want to spend stuff that'll make the value increase more than it will decrease by making it less scarce by putting out more coins.
exactly.
But you don't see this, right? And this is where I would call it almost like UX and product rather than economics, because economics aren't up for debate on that, but it's just people's perception. Basically, Ryan's idea was to, and I don't know if this part has been put up to a vote yet or whatever, but Ryan's part, his insight onto this would be the dash gets created regardless of whether it gets spent on the treasury or not. But whatever isn't spent on the treasury goes to the miners and the masternodes. So you actually see what you saved by not spending on things. And before this, the treasury's behavior, from my, you know, just from my, casual observation, has kind of already started to capture this, to grasp this concept where
Yes.
you see the price is not very high compared to where it has been before, but people are still leaving money on the table. And
Right.
in the past, they were just spending everything. And even when Dash had a $10 million monthly treasury at one point, 10 million, they only spent 40%. And they were there wasn't enough to fund. So with this whole flexible treasury idea, I think there's going to be a lot more people realizing they're saving money by not spending frivolously. And so
Correct.
all that to go down to the idea in that Ryan also proposed to increase the cap from a 10% of the coin emission to a possible 20%.
Right.
Not meaning that people would tend to spend double on the treasury and instead of infrastructure, but that people would tend to spend less because of this new, because of being aware of how much money it's costing them to fund proposals, but just that there's that flexibility in case you need to put in a big ask. So now let's just say that 10% is 20%.
Sure.
In the past, Dash Core Group has done a personal pledge, right, to keep to 10% of the 60% maximum of the 10%. Now, if it's a 20%, is it going to be now that 60% is twice as big of a chunk of the pie? Or is that now going to go to 30% of the 20%?
All right. So you're saying, now that the proposal system, or what
Yeah.
you're referring to as the treasury, increases from 10 to 20%, kind of will we remain at the 60%? Will we double to the 60% limit, or are we going to stay in absolute terms in terms of how much DAS we receive at the same level?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the intent of the proposal is not a land grab for Dash Corp, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't intend and we don't want our run rate to increase with available treasury.
Mm-hmm.
So what that would mean is that we would keep our run rate budget the same in absolute terms, meaning it would be reduced from 60%
Mm-hmm.
to 30%, right?
Yeah.
So what this proposal would really do is it really gives the masternodes more flexibility and
Mm-hmm.
freedom in figuring out how they want to do funding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think what could happen now is, as you mentioned, Dash Core Group is kind of, the big entity in the ecosystem where
Mm-hmm.
people, if they're looking to get hired or something like that, it would be great if, there were other organizations that sprang forth, right? That could add value, that convince the masternodes that, listen, it makes sense to fund us instead of not creating these coins, or, in the case of the new rules, having those funds going back out to miners or masternodes. It actually will increase the ROI for your Dash holdings if you were to fund our team, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
Dash Core Group 2 or Dash Core Group 3 could get spun out, and that I would find that to be really exciting. So, I think the other thing that this would do would be it would kind of set a floor for Dash Core Group funding, right? So if there's like a sustained drop to, let's say, $40 or $35
Mm-hmm.
in the price of Dash, I think at that point, Dash Core Group would explore putting forth a supplemental proposal
Mm-hmm.
over that 30% and leave the choice up to the masternodes. Should we kind of exceed that 30% self-imposed limit and you'll provide us funding on a temporary basis until the price goes up? Or do you kind of want us to, make some tough staffing decisions and some tough decisions about our spend, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it does, I wouldn't say we would never exceed that 30%, but the intent is for it to only be exceeded in, extraordinary circumstances. And even in those circumstances, be a separate proposal that would be asking the master nodes whether or not they would approve of something like that.
Yeah.
So what it gives is basically flexibility to the master nodes to figure out how it is that they want to spend the funds.
Yeah, because right now masters already have the flexibility to not spend funds on things.
Yes.
Whatever, but then there's the upper limit of, oh, it doesn't fit in this month. Oh, it's too sad. Come back next month.
Right.
And then it's just, yeah, it becomes a little murky. And also for those who don't remember, possibly before your time, I can't remember, but there was a time when Dashcore Group had a pledged limitation of I think it was 80% of the treasury. It was like in single
Right.
digit dash days, like back when
Yeah.
it's like you're
That was
trying to
before
like
my
keep,
time.
yeah, keep like a few developers on staff. This very small team, right? Not like it's a huge team today, but it was, very small, sort of amateur team, if you will. And it was like okay, well, we'll settle for 80%. So and obviously extenuating circumstances, like for example, if Dash had a sustained $30 price point for a while, I think that most master nodes, this is just a guess, would be okay with a 70 to 80% take rate just to keep all the development going forward. And they might demand that, for example, just be like, look, the treasury was created to fund development primarily, and it has to do at least that. And if it can't, then like we're all screwed anyway. So that's just my personal guess of how it would shake out. Now, with the 20%, because of that, is there any thought to a change in flexibility because of the new flexibility? Is there a thought to change the percentage or amount of reserves that Dash Core Group has? And the thought process that you want to have reserves in case something goes wrong, in case you don't have enough money 1 month or whatever, in case the price goes down.
Right.
But if you could, there's a much more flexible range of asking for proposals or supplemental funding thing. Does that short term or even long term, like say that, Dash Core Group is typically taking 8% of the treasury, at some point because of the price
Right.
and the doubled whatever, 8%, then would there be any thought of like, we don't need as much reserves, or is the reserves thing kind of a best practices? Like, is it just kind of a good idea regardless of how much flexibility you have to go back to the treasury and say, hey, guess what? We need to double our ask, but good news, there's a lot of room.
In my opinion, having reserve is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because, when the price goes down, it affects you disproportionately, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whatever dash you are holding on to is worth less now. Your expenses, most of our expenses, are, USD dollar or USD denominated, right? So our liabilities are in US dollars. Now the price goes down, we can request less funds from the network in US dollar terms. And we wouldn't want to suddenly ratchet up the percentage that we're asking from the network immediately when there are all these other projects, most likely, that are also getting hurt in the ecosystem, that are also asking for more money, right? So it's exactly when the price falls, when reserves become important, and when you want to slowly ratchet up your ask as opposed to asking for 70 to 80% and potentially even displacing a lot of important other projects in the ecosystem, right? So for me, it would harm the Dash network if we were to get rid of the reserves and the price were to go down, because now we're displacing other projects by, asking for a disproportionate amount of money. By having those reserves, we can use them to burn through them first before we have to ask for a lot more funding, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, I'm trying to think. There's a question I kind of have, but it's a little, it's definitely not in the home, not like a home, something one would have done homework for.
Okay.
So, generally speaking, in terms of economics, I understand and appreciate that the free market system is probably the most efficient in the world, where people have real consequences for bad decisions and they have real benefits for good decisions. And the treasury is always going to be sort of outside of the purely free market zone, in that you just kind of, you get people to like what you're doing and vote for it, and whether it pans out or not, it's a little more vague. Although with this exact attachment where you actually see how much your prices went up or down, how much your revenue went up or down based on what you fund as a masternode, where you see it more, I think we'll have that free market incentive on the negative side. But on the positive side, if you fund Dash Core Group, or you fund a marketing campaign, or you fund whatever else, it's a good idea. The revenue does not really come in for the good decision. You don't really see it as clearly unless like say you do a giant marketing and awareness campaign and it increases the value of, only if it increases the value of Dash, you could chart that. Like, hey, we did this marketing campaign here. Now the Dash price increased 10%. Yay, we made a lot of money. There's a lot of stuff where that's not the case. I mean, we see like Ethereum Classic still being valued very high despite just being attacked over and over and over again. There's no... Right. So if someone had those developers, if someone was paying for those developers, they didn't get fired as a result because it didn't really affect the price too much. So do you have any thoughts, and this could just be like, oh, I haven't thought about it, I have no thoughts, of a way to sort of introduce that free market element back into the potential upside of funding things? Or is that just going to be a thing? So is that just going to be a thing where it's always, as long as the crypto space is so ignorant and speculative, it's always going to be kind of fuzzy, and then once it becomes more stable and results based, then you'll actually see the price bumps from a good decision? Do you think that's a thing? Do you think that maybe it's just going to have to be where ROI of proposals will have to be measured in fees, where, hey, say we onboard an extra 1 million users, and we can't necessarily see where the price moves on there. We can't quantify that, but we can see this much in transaction fees coming, and we can determine it to be worth our while. Do you have any just thoughts on that? It's a very complicated subject.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think because we rely on having very low fees on the Dash network, we probably won't be able to generate meaningful revenue from transaction fees in the near future. What I can see is, on Dash platform, someone creating some type of app, right? Pretty sure I discussed this idea with Ryan in the last few days. And as part of that app, it's some type of merchant reward or merchant loyalty program, right? And the merchant, where they pay, let's say, 2% right now to a credit card, for something similar on Dash would pay 0.1%, right? Or, a significantly lower amount in terms of a fee that would make it still reasonable for them to pay the fee and they still get the benefits, but it makes sense for them to switch because it's a lot lower than what they're paying on a credit card, right? And then have that revenue stream flow back to the masternodes. I think a model like that is something that you're now talking about, right? So the apps you're creating on top of Dash platform, let's say, if they themselves can generate revenue, and if we can figure out a way to now send that revenue back to the masternodes and increase masternode ROI, it kind of starts creating now like a virtuous circle in terms of how the economics of the network would work.
Yeah.
So I think there's something there. I think it's, again, like you said, it's really early in the game, and there are a number of factors to consider as when you kind of start designing systems like this. But there is definitely a kernel of an idea there that you can start to work with.
Yeah, and if developers can split payments, so for example, if money goes through the app, and there's a very small bit that comes back to the developer, that's easier for them to do an entrepreneurial kind of idea. But there would be a kind of thing of, well, let's design something that doesn't have that benefit for the person, but I'd rather get paid upfront by the treasury to build this kind of a system, and then it just only benefits masternodes and miners and stuff for that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So you get to choose whether you want skin in the game and how much skin in the game you want, right?
Yeah. It's like a public good idea for ROI versus, because like a lot of people just are not in a very good financial position to just do something like that, or they don't have the financial or marketing acumen really to just to be a business person. They know how to create a great product, but that's it. They don't know how to do the rest of it, and they can't, they don't want to go around they just want the network to be the business that takes this product to market. They just want to build the product. So it could be a thing like that. And so when we're talking about fees, that just one thing I've been trying to help push forward is like the Dash Twitter idea, and especially if you have some sort of a monetization scheme in there where people are tipping each other for visibility and things like that. If you get something built in there, if the Dash fees, network fees, are supposed to remain around a cent USD or lower, then say you have a regular Dash user like myself, I don't think I send more than 100 payments a year. Like, I'm not buying things every day, period. I'm not just not with Dash, but not period. So that's like $1 a user. That's nothing for fee for the whole network to fight over. But if you have like, okay, a registered username, I'm always friending people on social media through, Dash contacts, and I'm updating my profile and I'm uploading images and I'm, tweeting a million times, especially after like a political figure annoys me very much on a day, and I'm just like all day doing that stuff.
Right.
And then someone says something really fantastic that I love. I'm just like, I'm going to send this guy 8 cents for the Dash for thank you. There you go. Then you have ping, 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 all those credits going back and forth, all the actual Dash transactions going back and forth. And then you all of a sudden, I could easily imagine myself doing 1,000 payments a year just on, depending if I'm tipping like 8 people in a day or whatever, just on this kind of platform. And then of course all the residual fees, then you start talking about actual income, especially if you get something at scale where you have like a million users. I think it'd be a lot easier to onboard 1 million social media users than it would be to onboard 1 million credit card users that are going to be swiping that card every day or something. It's just a lot easier just, sign up for a site and go, shit post, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think we have one question, which I don't know how up your alley it is, but has Dash ever considered wrapped Dash on ETH, on Ethereum? I don't know if you know too much about the like WBTC, wrapped Bitcoin and stuff.
Wrapped Bitcoin, I know. I know about it. I haven't explored it. I honestly have not looked into it, so I wouldn't feel comfortable answering that question, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I had to get that in there. So
yeah, no worries.
Anything you're excited about upcoming pretty soon, other than I guess Tuesday?
I mean, pretty excited about reaching that 3-month reserve minimum for compensation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where we are right now. I'm excited about some of the conversations we had around trying to figure out how to get Dash listed in the New York market, which we didn't discuss, but that would be a big step as well. We're trying to find exchanges and partners that would be looking to list us there. The NYDFS recently set out a new set of rules around how to join a green list there as far as tokens, and they kind of populated that green list with 10 existing tokens that are listed. But it'd be great to add Dash in that important market too, right? So that would be amazing, and that would definitely help us in terms of getting relisted in Japan, right? So there's a strategy we're trying to execute there. And then, Dash platform on testnet next quarter. Excited about that too. So yeah.
That will be very exciting.
A lot of really cool developments. I'm optimistic about where we are. I feel really good.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, if any of you out there watching enjoyed this, you should subscribe. There's a button there. It doesn't work, but it's a button. Doing my best. And then there's also a link to my Cointree where you can use donations, and people do leave a message to the donations. So they're like, great podcast. I loved having Glenn on. Or someone says, thanks for the meme you sent the other day. And then I kind of knew who it was. And so if you want to leave a donation for that, that's how you do it. And so make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. And I am going to this might be the first episode. It depends if I get it on time, that I'm going to get back to putting on the audio only version on all the old podcast networks. It's not just YouTube and LBRY and those kinds of things. So that should be cool. So now it's time for the thing we call the after party, which is a fun, happy conversation like this, but much more casual and not recorded, so don't worry. And that happens just sometimes up to the wee hours of the morning. You have to go to the Dash Talk Discord, which a lot of cool stuff happens there anyway, to get in on that. So go to staydashy.com. I'll type it out in the live chat. Stay. I should have like this typed. And then that gets you into the Dash Talk Discord, and then you just start asking around for the after party, like a speakeasy, and someone will plug you in. So Glenn, it's been a fantastic pleasure chatting with you. This is a lot of really fascinating stuff, and I hope you enjoyed your time here.
Yeah, I did. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
And hopefully
Have a
see you
great
again
day.
soon. And
Absolutely.
bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.